The sky over Bridal Creek Ranch was wide and endless, painted with streaks of orange as the sun dipped below the horizon. To anyone driving past, the old wooden fences and weathered barns looked ordinary, but to Captain Marcus Ellery, that land was his sanctuary. It had belonged to his father, a man who raised cattle and children with equal strength. And now, though Marcus wore the uniform of the United States Army, the ranch was his dream, a place where he would return after deployments, where he would raise his daughter, where memories of his late wife lingered in the walls of the farmhouse. But while Marcus was overseas, thousands of miles away in a desert no one wanted to remember, trouble brewed at home. The Bridal Creek Homeowners Association had long resented Marcus's independence. His ranch wasn't part of their pristine gated community, but the HOA had slowly expanded, claiming authority where it had none. They didn't like the sight of cattle near their golf course lawns. They didn't like that Marcus, a black man, refused to bow to their constant letters and threats. So one day, while Marcus was halfway through his tour, the HOA board voted in secret. They claimed his property was abandoned. They forged paperwork, sold the land, and congratulated themselves for cleaning up the neighborhood. They underestimated two things: the kindness of Marcus's neighbors and the strength of a soldier's community. When Marcus's childhood friend Evelyn Carter drove past the ranch and saw strangers tearing down his fences, she stopped her truck in shock. Evelyn was no fighter. She taught second grade, spent weekends knitting, and lived a quiet life. But she had known Marcus since they were kids running barefoot through the creeks. She couldn't stand by. "Excuse me," she shouted from her truck window. "What do you think you're doing?" The workers shrugged. "HOA says this land's theirs now. Orders are orders." Evelyn's hands trembled. "This land belongs to Captain Ellery. He's serving overseas. You can't just take his home." But the men only laughed. "Lady, we don't make the rules. Talk to the HOA board." Evelyn drove straight into town, heart pounding. She called Marcus's sister, his pastor, even his old football coach. Within hours, a small group gathered at the ranch. They didn't have weapons or badges of authority, but they had loyalty. They stood shoulder to shoulder at the fence line, refusing to move. Evelyn held a sign she'd scribbled in marker. "This is a soldier's home. Not for sale." For days, they kept watch. They brought food, shared stories, prayed. Every time the HOA tried to push further, Evelyn and the others pushed back, not with violence, but with unwavering presence. And though Marcus never knew it while he served abroad, kindness held his ranch together. Kindness wore the face of neighbors who believed his service meant more than paperwork. Kindness was Evelyn, who stayed up all night on the porch with a lantern, just to make sure his home was never truly abandoned. Because kindness, at its core, is this: standing guard when someone else can't. When Marcus finally returned home months later, the reunion wasn't the one he imagined. Instead of quiet mornings on the porch and the smell of cedar wood, he found eviction notices nailed to his gate and survey markers cutting through his fields. His ranch, the home he bled and sacrificed for, wasn't legally his anymore. On paper, the HOA had already sold it, divided it, parceled it to wealthy families who bragged about their new property. Marcus stood in silence, his daughter clutching his hand. He had faced warlords, stared down death, and buried friends. Yet nothing compared to this: a betrayal in his own country, by people who had never worn a uniform, never missed birthdays in the name of service. But Marcus was not alone. Word of what had happened spread quickly through his unit, through the army, through the very men and women he had trained and led. Soldiers he hadn't seen in years called him. Veterans from other states showed up unannounced at the ranch, shaking his hand, telling him, "We've got your back, Captain." And then the army itself took notice. At first, Marcus resisted. He was humble, not one to make noise. But the men and women he had once helped now insisted on helping him. They filed reports, contacted legal aid, and petitioned state officials. The HOA might have forged paperwork, but Marcus had something stronger: the brotherhood of those who understood sacrifice. One Saturday morning, dozens of veterans rolled into Bridal Creek in trucks, jeeps, even motorcycles. They parked across every road leading to the ranch. Their presence was undeniable. The sight of combat boots marching down suburban streets sent a message no legal document could erase. The HOA panicked. They called the police. But when officers arrived and saw uniformed veterans standing in solidarity, they didn't move them. Instead, one officer shook Marcus's hand. Weeks turned into months. Legal battles raged. But the veterans didn't leave. They rebuilt Marcus's fences. They repainted his barn. They carried hay bales, repaired roofs, and refused a dime in payment. When Marcus asked why, Sergeant Luis Moreno, a soldier he once trained, simply said, "Sir, you trained us to never leave a man behind. Now it's our turn." Finally, the court ruled. The HOA's actions were fraudulent. Every house they sold using Marcus's land was revoked. Families who had knowingly bought stolen property were forced out. One by one, the stolen houses were cleared. And piece by piece, Marcus's ranch returned to him. But the victory was more than legal. It was personal. On the day the final eviction notice was removed, Marcus stood before a crowd of neighbors, veterans, and friends. His daughter ran through the fields, laughter echoing against the hills. Evelyn wiped tears from her eyes. Marcus raised his voice, steady and strong. "I fought for this country, but today it fought for me. And it wasn't the government, it was people. My brothers, my sisters. You all reminded me that helping isn't about duty. It's about love. And I'll never forget it." The crowd erupted in cheers. Some cried. Some saluted. And Marcus, the soldier who had given so much, finally received the help he never thought he'd need. Because helping at its core is this: showing up when someone's fight is too heavy to carry alone.